Development Director. Just received an award last Friday from the EDC and testimony to enormous contributions he's given to supporting business in this town. Certainly compared a lot better to the poor people in Swim who were were flayed alive for being rather tardy on some permits. Anyway, Nathan, take it away. All right.
Thank you, John, and I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm going to try to stand up here, and if it's not working, let me know and I'll move over to the mic. But I really wanted to have you all think about and take a look at some of the Port Angeles trends that are occurring, and particularly looking at the years 2014 and 2015, and really watching our economy grow and see some of the changes that are taking place, because sometimes it's hard to recognize that growth and be aware of what's taking place unless you take the time to really focus on what those changes were and what's actually happening. So I have to say I'm really excited about what we've seen in 2014 and 2015, and I want to highlight some of that for you today, as well as talk about some of the projects that we have been working on over the past year, as well as some of those projects that we're going to be working on this year and beyond. So if you look at the 2014 and 2015 years, particularly when it comes to building permits, we saw the building permit value actually increase in 2014 from 11.5 million to 15 million. And in 2014, we saw a 23% increase in single-family dwelling units. I think that's really important because what we were seeing prior to 2014 was a lot of renovations and alterations to houses, not a lot of concrete development, just minor repairs and real smaller development. But to see that number of single-family residences that we saw in 2014, and I must say we saw that again in 2015, that's a really good indicator that things are doing much better in our local economy. I think too, it's a great measure to see 48 new occupancy. Occupancy are a measure of new commercial businesses typically opening their doors. And what's important there is that those are all commercial properties. Some of those are moves or relocates. But in any case, it's really important to see that kind of number coming forward. And I can tell you we haven't seen those types of numbers for probably since 2008. So another really good sign. In 2015, we actually saw the permit value increase from that 15.6 million to 60 million. And let me tell you, the only higher value that we have seen at the City of Port Angeles in the city's history is when we had a $75 million application for the Nippon biomass plant in 2011. So aside from that, the 60 million is a record-setting year for the City of Port Angeles, being that it reflects multiple applications. Wow. Additionally, we saw a 13% increase in permits in 2015 as compared to 2014. Typically, we see a trend of seasonal changes relative to permit applications. This year, we saw one little blip in the month of November where things dropped down. In December, they picked right back up. And basically, we saw a continuation throughout the year of permits coming in, which was a really significant change for my department, but also a really good indicator that things are moving in a great direction for the local economy. In 2015, we had approximately 5 major projects, and Olympic Medical Center is a huge one for the City of Port Angeles. It was over $14.7 million of investment in our local community. It is going to be bringing in a number of jobs, and it's really interesting that one of the things that they did to make that campus project work for the new office building is they actually utilized one of the new policies that we developed and was approved by City Council, which is the mixed commercial overlay zoning application. It provides for a more flexible zoning standard, and they were able to utilize those new regulations to put this into play. And so we really like to see those new regulations being utilized, tried out, and see if they work. Peninsula College made a huge investment on their campus. The Composite Recycling Technology Center, I anticipate that's going to be bringing a lot more growth to our economy in the very near future. Olympic Veterinary Clinic was one of our larger private sector investments in the community. We're really happy with what they did. They did take part in our facade improvement program, and Todd Fisher, who's sitting over here, did some excellent artwork for them to improve those facade changes. And then also we saw McDonald's coming in, and as you see outside, they're actually doing a complete demolition of the site and a complete rebuild of the site there at the First and Front Street corridor. So those were our major projects in 2015. I want to go back and just make everyone aware of my departmental responsibilities. The Community and Economic Development Department covers a lot of ground, and we don't have a lot of staff, but we do a lot of diversity, and that really makes the job fun. But the building division is one of those, and building really looks at the building permits, does the inspections to make sure buildings meet code. Cultural resources, we take very seriously our responsibility relative to cultural resources in this community, particularly in the shoreline areas. And we do administer a archaeological contract with a number of different archaeological firms to make sure that we monitor when it's appropriate for specific projects in the shoreline area. Additionally, economic development is an important division that we work on, and then planning, using all those land use issues and applications and getting those processed, supporting the Planning Commission, supporting PA Forward, and other groups that do that for the city. As far as some of our larger projects, we are the administrator of the Community Development Block Grant Program for the city of Port Angeles. We administer a street tree program. Kai mentioned some of the intent with that street tree program, and there's been quite a few changes with that, including a dedicated fund should trees be damaged, that there is funding that can go into a dedicated fund to replace some of those trees in the street corridors. We have a facade improvement program. We've had that program in place since 2009. It's been a very successful program. We provide up to $10,000 for facade improvements that private businesses would like to make to their facades, as well as an additional $1,000 sign replacement grant if someone wants to come in and replace their existing signage. Will contribute again 50% up to $10,000 or up to $1,000 for a sign for the facade and sign improvement program. We also administer the tourism marketing and event grant contracts for the city, and that's been a new program that we've taken on. A lot of work goes into that, but we're really excited to have Vertigo Marketing on board this year. They have 5 different local subcontractors who are working very closely with them, and I anticipate we're going to have some really good results there, including a new web page, visitportangeles.com. The Waterfront Transportation Improvement Project is also one of the capital projects that we manage, and we also work very closely with the City Attorney's Office and City Manager's Office on the harbor cleanup effort. Economic development, retention, and recruitment. It's extremely important that we work with all our partners in the community to make those successes, to make expansion successes of our existing businesses, make sure we're meeting the needs of existing businesses, and then also working to bring new businesses in that complement the existing businesses that we have. We manage over 25 different contracts in my department, as well as administer a Choose Local campaign, and we typically do periodic advertisements throughout the year on Facebook, on KONP, and in the PDN for the Choose Local campaign. And then we administer over $8 million in federal and state grants. We have quite a few planned and implemented policy changes that I think are significant, really important to point out. One of my favorites is a new system that City Council implemented last year that we're excited about, and that's the hearings examiner system. And part of that was a trade-off in that historically we've had the City Planning Commission do all quasi-judicial applications, and basically those subdivision applications, those conditional use permit applications where there's a public hearing involved. And one of the compromises with the new system that was put in place is a number of those permits were truly streamlined in a manner that they could be processed administratively, processed more quickly. It enables us to be more responsive to the customer, and that's something that I'm really excited about. Additionally, we have a more balanced approach in that we have consistent decision making with the hearings examiner. There's no opportunity for one of a 7-member committee to make certain judgments or different views based on what their perception is. It's a one individual decision, similar to a judge type approach. But again, many of the applications, including conditional use permits, including shoreline substantial development permits, are now an administrative approach which can be done much more quickly and much more efficiently. I want to talk a little bit about the cottage housing and tiny house changes that were made, and those were approved by City Council at the first meeting in January. That's a really exciting opportunity as well, because I think you're all aware that Port Angeles has a great depth of history. And when you look around town, we have a great deal of buildings that are non-conforming relative to existing zoning code. And that makes it really challenging when someone wants to sell their property, or they want to come in and they want to redevelop a garage, for example, that is not compliant with certain setbacks. So the change here actually enables setbacks for an accessory residential unit, for example, to actually be constructed above a garage under the ancillary garage structure type setbacks. And it offers a great deal of flexibility. It also recognizes a need in our economy for affordable housing. The idea that if you have individuals who've just come out of school, they need a really affordable place to stay, and the family would like to invest in a residential component to their existing garage, it makes that a lot more affordable. And at the end of the day, the city also wins because we have additional utility hookups out there, and the taxpayers share less of a burden because there's more people paying into the utilities. So a lot of wins with that. It also allows for a 21,000 square foot approach. If a developer came in and wanted to take 21,000 square feet, basically 3 city lots, combine them together, and you could do a cottage-style planned unit development. So that's a pretty neat opportunity as well. One of the ones that I'm less excited about, but I'm going to speak to anyway because it's really important to the development community here as well as to the business community, and that's the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Phase 2 permit. You may recall that in 2007, the city was asked to implement a Phase 2 water system in the city, issued a number of mandates by the State Department of Ecology that require we have a number of best management practices in place for development in the community. Since that time, 2 additional layers of regulation have been added on to that permit. And this second layer that's being added on actually requires that any developer coming in must pursue low impact development first and as the preferred alternative. And if you deem that low impact development is not an option, then and only then can you move forward with a different option. That's a really difficult mandate to follow through with and make flexible, but I can tell you we are striving to make it be a flexible approach so that there are trade-offs. And basically, if you do some of the development techniques, we'd like to also give incentives from a regulatory perspective to make development a little bit more flexible there. And so we're working on that, and that's something that you'll likely see come before Planning Commission in the very near future, as well as City Council. We have a deadline to have that implemented by June 30th of this year. The next one I want to talk about is a social services zone review. And I think we've had a lot of input and feedback as far as the impact of some of our social services that are provided in our primary commercial corridors, and that there is some impact to the local businesses that are abutting some of those services. And so we recognize at the city that it's a multiple department approach, multiple member of the community approach will have to look at this issue, but we're going to look at it from a zoning perspective, actually take a look at the historic growth in social services and see what those best locations are. And that should be an interesting review, and that's probably one of the lower ones on the priority list that you see up here, because many of these either have been done or are mandates that we have to do. Jumping to the comprehensive plan update, that is also a state mandate. We have to have our comprehensive plan updated by June 30th of this year. That's going to be a difficult feat for us, but we're going to do our best to get it done. in a timely manner. Along with that state requirement, you also have to look at your critical area ordinance. Here locally, we refer to it as the environmentally sensitive area ordinance, and those have to be updated as part of the comprehensive plan update. Yes, sir?
Who buys off on that, or submitted to whom?
So it does get reviewed by the State Department of Commerce as primarily, but it also gets circulated and reviewed by the State Department of Ecology. So one of the things that we face on a daily basis is the future developability of Port Angeles. And I think this is really intriguing if you take a look at the numbers. We have about 9,800 parcels in the city of Port Angeles, and approximately 7,300 of them already contain a building. So you have a little bit over 2,000 undeveloped properties. But of those, 494 are undeveloped and zoned residential. So I would say that a majority of those 2,461 are probably found in our public buildings and park zoning, which also acts as our critical area. And so all the creek corridors comprise many of those 2,000 units. So there's not a lot of developability left in Port Angeles. And something that we find more and more frequently is a lot of the lots that we have out there are the more difficult ones to develop. And that's a challenge that we face daily at our front counter, because we have to work with any developer or applicant that comes in to help them find ways to make things work under existing code. And then 17 undeveloped residential residential properties that are greater than 3.44 acres. That's not a lot of larger property, not a lot of opportunity for large subdivisions in the community, and really illustrates that eventually redevelopment may become a preferred option, because there's not a lot of room to grow and expand in the form of greenfield development or large-scale subdivision expansion. And then we have 64 undeveloped residential areas that are greater than 21,000 square feet. And the reason why I mention that is because our number of our overlay zones actually allow a developer to come in and compile 3 residential lots that are adjoining and do a planned unit development style approach on those 3 lots, providing a good opportunity. But you can see there's quite a few more opportunities to do that here in the city. I want to talk a little bit about the waterfront redevelopment. I want to clarify some things relative to phase 2. It is not yet complete, but we are working towards getting it complete, and we certainly expect to have it fully complete this spring. Some of the things that have yet to be done, we are still waiting for artwork on some of the benches in the park. We're still waiting for the wind spires that will actually power the lighting in the park. We're still waiting.
Can you talk about that? That's really cool. Our wind spires.
So in the far west corner of the park, just above the Valley Creek estuary, there are 3 concrete foundations, and those will actually be the home for 3 new wind spires that generate wind power and put electricity on the grid that we hope compensates for the actual lighting of the project. And again, if you go all the way back to the beginning of the project, one of the primary focuses was called Points of Light. It was something developed out of a public meeting. The idea is keeping the lights on for people year-round, as well as 24 hours a day, just making it a more friendly environment downtown for activity. And so the lighting was really important, but we were also cognizant of the increase in cost that having to light that area might have as an impact to the city, and we wanted to compensate that, and that's why you see the wind spires there. But we've had some excellent volunteer improvements to the tower out in the park, and that's something that we're really excited about and grateful for. And I know Kai's son, Moritz, was very effective in getting that completed, and we're grateful to him for that. We also have 4 vendor locations in the park. And so this spring we'll be doing a request for proposals for vendors to actually come in and locate in the park. And whatever it might be, it may be a recreational activity, whether it's a kayak vendor who wants to allow people to kayak off the beaches, whether it's someone who wants to sell goods, whether it's a food vendor. There's quite a few options there, but we're looking for some really good proposals to do actually out in that plaza area. So that's phase 2, and if there's any other questions on that, I can come back to that if necessary. But overall, assuming phase 2 is complete this spring, we will have had 6 out of the 11 different phases completed. And I think it's important to mention that we really broke the entire project up from Hollywood Beach to Valley Creek Estuary. We designed it into 11 phases so that as we received the funding, we could move forward with little increments of the project one at a time and make it work from a funding perspective. We recognized there wasn't a lot of funding out there. We have been more successful than we anticipated with grants, and now we're over halfway there, and that's a really exciting thing. It's also important to mention along those lines that we were very proactive with the permitting, and I think many of you know we actually got the entire project permitted at once. And so we have through the end of 2017 to exercise those permits for the entire project. But I can tell you we're really happy that we went for all of them at once, because going through that process again is not something that we would want to do. There are 2 primary areas left that, again, those are also broken into multiple phases, but I think if you looked at those 2 options of what we have left as what could be a 3rd phase and a 4th phase, it would be the continuation of Railroad Avenue from Laurel Street to Lincoln Street. And the second one would be the City Pier Hollywood Beach area. And so one of those 2 would become phase 3. And at this point, more than likely it will be the City Pier Hollywood Beach area that would become phase 3. And our intent is to work closely with Barrow Marine Life Center and NOAA, being that they have a lot of interest in making renovations to that building, and essentially they would work on the building aspects of the project, we would work on the site aspects of the project, and it would be a nice partnership approach, but also recognizing there's a lot of infrastructure on the City Pier facility that really needs some attention and replacement, and it's really important that we move forward with that fairly soon. I think it's also important, though, that relative to the 3rd and 4th phases, the public input that we received, and I'll go back to that a little bit because many of you participated in that process, but I can tell you we have had over 120 outreach efforts. It was the most publicly involved project that I'm aware of that the city has ever done, and so we had a lot of public involvement, but at the same time we recognize that public involvement is now 5 years old. So it's been some time since we received that, and we want to renew that public input. We want to get fresh input, and that's something that we'll be working with Barrow Marine Life Center and NOAA on, is public input for what would be the 3rd phase City Pier area. Something that includes, that I know has been discussed in this group, is the intersection of Lincoln Street and Railroad. And I think that's really important, that we really want to hear anew from the public as to what they want to see happen there. I will tell you that originally, you can see the concept just behind this graphic here, and that original concept did contemplate a traffic circle in that area. I can tell you that shortly after that concept was developed, we actually had traffic engineers on the project come through and basically do some detailed analysis, and they told us that that was not something that would work. And so since that time, the center portion of that intersection has actually been removed from the concept and not something that we intend to do. I think it's important to make that clear because there's been a lot of misinformation out there about that. But I do also want to say that there's a lot of opportunity for the public to provide new input, recognizing that no design has been complete at this point in time. We simply have a concept, we have some permits done, and we really want to make sure that we're following through with the public interest at the end of the day. I spoke a little bit already about City Pier infrastructure, and I just want to emphasize that we really need to pay some attention to that infrastructure. The Ray Street corridor has been a really important project since at least 2009. We had incorporated, as a result of the American Institute of Architects Sustainable Design Assessment team that came here to visit, it was listed as one of the top 10 capital facilities projects that we needed to work on, and it is in fact a waterfront transportation improvement plan project. You may remember that the waterfront was the focal point of that project, but it entailed projects throughout the community, and the Ray Street corridor was one of those 10 projects. So we've been working on it for some time. We had some concepts developed as part of the waterfront project, and at the end of the day, we went after a number of grants, and we were successful in receiving a grant from the Federal Lands Access Program to receive design funding to actually take that concept and develop it into a new streetscape design. One of the great benefits of that corridor is it's a 100-foot wide right-of-way, lots of room to do a complete street approach, which would entail bikeways, sidewalks, and we also hope to have a boulevard-style median. But we really want to present ourselves well to those 4 million visitors that we have utilizing that roadway on a regular basis. And it's pretty important to get that corridor right. It's also important that we don't have a lot of capital to spend on streets right now. So when we see an opportunity for federal grant revenue to participate in street improvements, that's a great thing, and we want to follow through with it. City match to the $408,000 design projects is about $63,000, and that comes out of the city's real estate excise tax fund. But again, that's a project we're really excited about. It's one that the National Park Service has been very involved in, and we're really grateful for their support and effort to make that grant a success. So that's what I had for you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on what I presented, as well as things that I may not have touched on that you would have liked me to touch on. George?
The last item on that last slide was about complete streets. Could you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, complete streets is a concept that's been around for several years now, but it's the concept of really making sure that a street contains everything, including landscaping, alternative transportation routes for bicycle transportation, pedestrian transportation, vehicular traffic, and just really balancing that with a landscaped environment. And so it's really a balanced approach, recognizing multiple modes of transportation. Kai?
Regarding the potential phase 3 on the waterfront, if you can comment a little bit on the prospects for the timing as far as grant opportunities you see. I mean, it looks like there's a 24-month clock ticking, so to speak, with regard to the permits. And also specifically with regard to City Pier, whether we're talking about replacing or working on just the railing or also structural members of the pier, and what environmental issues might be involved with that. Do we have creosote pilings? That would have to be removed, or do we not have to touch those? How big a deal is that? I know piers sometimes can have lots of regulatory ramifications when you have to do things with them.
Yeah, I think Kai would probably be better for Corey Delicott, our Parks and Recreation Director, to answer the detailed questions. I know there have been some recent assessments, and relative to the timber, I think the pier is structurally sound. There's no issues there, but there's certainly a lot of maintenance that needs to happen there. I think you'll see that we are concerned long-term about the creosote there, and I think that's something likely to come up in the harbor cleanup effort as something that needs some attention, but also recognizing that it may not be the city who comes in and actually replaces and provides funding for those creosote replacements.
And the 2 years we have left on the permits, what visibility, if any, do you have as to how much you think will be possible to get funded and done during those 2 years realistically?
So I think realistically, these 2 remaining phases, there's some much easier ways to go about the projects that will likely make them leaner from a financial perspective. And to me, that opens the door for a lot of grant opportunities that are out there. Typically, the RCO program provides multiple grants up to $500,000. That's something that we'll be looking at closely. We'll also be looking at other federal grant opportunities that come up. But we're constantly having our eyes open, going out there looking to see what we can find. It's worked for us in the past, and I think we're going to continue to find some in the future. Thank you. Yes,
could you address commercial and industrial vacancies and underutilization, and maybe address what kinds of things are being done to attract higher tech industries, things that in fact don't have environmental impacts, major environmental impacts, don't require new buildings. It looks as if there's a lot of talent that could be forming startups, that could be collaborating, it's not happening.
I do think there's a great deal of industrial land out there that is available in the city of Port Angeles.
Already developed land.
Already vacant, but I would say developable property. Probably the majority of that is owned by the Port of Port Angeles, and but there's a great deal of opportunity out there. There are also existing sites that have buildings already constructed, such as at the Composite Campus, and I think the Composite Campus, a port facility, I think it's recognized that that can be a campus for any type of advanced manufacturing and not necessarily just composites. So there's some great opportunities there, a great deal of opportunities around the airport, and we have a great deal of opportunities relative to commercial properties as well.
Do we have lots of vacant or underutilized office space, vacant or underutilized industrial space? I mean land, but rather buildings, in fact, whose available rents are now very low.
We do. We have a great deal of commercial office space that's available now. I can't quote you any numbers, but I can tell you there's a lot of space. Simultaneously, though, I would say that it's substantially less than what we had approximately 2 years ago.
Okay.
If you looked at those opportunities in 2013, you have a lot fewer, or you have a lot more spaces back then if you were looking for a property. I will say it's important to recognize, though, that the overall market nationally has changed, and recognizing that the demand and need for square footage from a retail perspective has been reduced. And so I still, in my opinion, is still very much a renter's market, and if someone is looking for a space, the market is on their side, and that's just because we have a lot that is available right now, but a national issue, and part of that is just the amount of business that takes place on the internet.
And are there efforts, in fact, to increase that business in PA?
Absolutely. There's a number of efforts to increase that business. Part of what John mentioned in his introduction is the Economic Development Council and their efforts, and they are looking at quite a diversity of different businesses to bring into the community from a recruitment perspective, but also look at some that really complement what we have here on the ground. We've also done quite a bit of work in the retail sector, and we work with the International Council of Shopping Centers, attend their conferences, make them aware of some of the opportunities that we have in our community, and that's another important one that isn't always recognized.
My concern is that we may be hemorrhaging young talent.
I think we all share that concern in this community, and I think everyone desires, and that's something that we frequently hear about in public meetings, is really ensuring that we have a place for kids to work when they grow up, when they come back from school, or when they get out of high school, making sure that they have a place to be employed.
Go ahead.
Regarding the vision for the tiny homes, or whatever they're called, is there a specific location that the city is thinking about where these are going to be located? And second question to that is, adjacent properties to where they're going to be located, do you see any property evaluations going down because of it?
I do not see property valuations going down. In fact, some of those structures are in such need of improvement, it's actually going to be a good thing to see people able to invest in those facilities that were previously deemed to be non-conformities that couldn't be improved. So I think that's a change that will actually help property values. But I will say it is confined to certain areas, particularly, and there's really two different elements out there. Both the cottage overlay zone is limited to approximately 3 specific zones in town, as well as the tiny house approach to an accessory structure in your backyard is also limited to specific zones. John?
Guys, 2 quick ones. What on the vendor spots on the waterfront, when does that go into effect, if anything?
So we hope to get that out on the street in early March.
And would it be year-round?
We would advertise, and absolutely we would love to have vendors there year-round. But we also recognize some of the activities may only work from the seasonal perspective. But we'll be hoping to get those this spring.
If I could ask too, one thing that wasn't in your presentation was the status of the citywide Wi-Fi system. Is that still viable?
It is still viable. I can tell you that The city's role in that is predominantly relative to the emergency services infrastructure that we utilize. So OliPen does the management of the private sector side of things and is responsible for marketing as well as providing customer service for the overall Wi-Fi system. It is a network that we're extremely proud of, and it's something that very few cities in this country have to offer as an asset. It's something that I think is very exciting to those new businesses that we talk to that may want to relocate to the community.
Is there any signage for this though? I've never seen any signs anywhere. Let's say I'm a tourist coming into Port Angeles, and by the way, you have a free hour of Wi-Fi.
I think that what we've seen is a better approach to marketing in the past. It's been quite some time since I've seen any type of marketing or signage for that specific program. But again, that'd be a private sector responsibility.
Okay.
And then?
One of the things that, and this is not sour grapes, John just addressed it a little bit. The gypsy vendors that come to town for 3 months in the summer, they don't support United Way. They don't support OMC, Festival of Trees. They just come in and park down there across, they get the permit, but they park across from Young. They park across from me. Vicki, she's not here, so I'm speaking for her, and she may not like that. But she's there year-round with her bicycles, with her kayaks, with all of her stuff. To have somebody come in for 45 days and not pay much in taxes, city services, or anything else, and take away from her business that's there 12 months of the year, hurts my feelings. I don't care how the signage is, I don't care how wonderful it looks. It's not fair to those of us in the community who are here 12 months of the year to have a gypsy come in. And I use that term not ethnically, but adjectively.
I will say that at least most of the interest that I've heard about for those vendor locations has been local interest. And my hope would be that certainly one of our existing businesses might be interested in applying and basically, having a satellite approach to one of their existing businesses. But we certainly are cognizant of that, and we'd be more than happy to work with existing businesses on what they feel might be leveling the playing field for out there, whether it means that those vendors also participate in the PBIA or whatever it takes, but we'd be happy to have that discussion.
Yeah, because those, and I don't like the word transients, it's better than my other word, but those folks don't even have to join the PBIA, which I pay $69 a quarter.
Will there be a charge for that space or a fee for those vending spaces?
There would be, absolutely. The city's responsibility is to charge fair market value, so that's something that we have to do. Yeah?
How will that selection process go to select the vendors?
I'd be happy to speak to that once we've developed that selection process. So at this point, I would encourage anybody who has input on that process to send us an email and let us know what you'd like to see there. And that may influence the way we write the RFP.
We just did.
I have, it's kind of the wind spires in phase 2. How feasible is it to use that concept on phase 3 and the downtown area to light up?
I would say it's not infeasible, but I would say it would probably take some infrastructure improvements, and recognizing that the area to the west of the waterfront project, much of that was basically new development where we had a lot of ground disturbing activity involved. I think if you look to the east, there's going to be a lot less ground disturbing activity involved, which makes it a lot harder to get new infrastructure in. And there certainly is a need to do infrastructure conduit and utilities to get the power from one place to another. So it may be a little bit more tricky, and I'm just not sure of what location we choose for that. Sam, I think, was next.
Nathan, what can you tell us about the moving forward with the Eastern UGA annexation? What's on your horizon for that?
So in I believe it was last year, 2015, we had the ability to move forward with the first phase of Eastern UGA annexation. At this point, I'm not aware of any council interest in actually seeing that move forward at this time. And I think part of it is that we have a great deal of things to accomplish as a city prior to moving forward with some new steps, and we want to make sure that we're in a good position to do that before we move forward. But at this point, we're always open to a private sector initiated annexation, but right now I don't anticipate that we're going to see the city pursuing one. And you know, perhaps we'll hear differently from City Council, but right now that's I haven't had any input or pressure that needs to be a priority work plan item.
Looks like we have time for one more question.
Kai,
Nobody else has asked another one, and that's regarding the use of funds for beautifying facades and signs. We have some abandoned signs in town that are not add to the beauty of the city, and it's in some cases a little bit hard to figure out what to do with them. It's easy to fault the landlord, but it's not always necessarily the landlord's fault. There's a specific example on Lincoln between 5th and 6th. There's a building with 4 retail locations in it. One of them is empty. The sign above the one that is empty had just black paint slapped on it for years because it has not been used. I understand why the owner doesn't want to take it down, because you can't get new sign permits, and the building which is for sale is going to be more valuable to the new owner with the ability to have a sign on the roof than without it. The owner doesn't want to pay to upgrade a sign over an empty retail location on a building that's for sale anyway, but it's a real eyesore. Is there any way to use the city funds for signs? The owner is very willing to consider things as long as it doesn't cost her any money. Is there any way to use the funds the city has available together with volunteers to say, look, the city can provide $500 and we're going to put up a mountain landscape or a sea landscape up there until there's a new retail location in that wants to advertise their business, just so you don't have it look like a slum? Or does that run into any kinds of regulations for use of public funds?
so that's certainly something that we can do. It's something we have done. So if you look at the building at Lincoln and Front Street, that was a facade improvement application to replace all those windows. And you may recall it used to be boarded up, but we actually supported that facade improvement application, recognizing that it would make the building more attractive and more likely to actually see a new business coming in and locating there. So that's something that we'd love to talk to them about. Simultaneously, we do have an enforcement responsibility. Relative to enforcement, though, we take a pretty soft hand, and we really like to work with property owners first. And the specific site that you were mentioning, that's something where our building inspector has been working with the property owner to try to get that resolved. And again, it's a step process, and if we don't get cooperation right off the bat, then we have to take additional letter writing steps. But ideally, we'd like to start with more of a proactive approach, such as you mentioned, which would be participating in the facade or sign improvement program, where we can be out there helping them rather than asking them to comply.
John says
I think, yeah, and then point of privilege to add to that.
You started the Lincoln conversation at first. What are we going to do about the building to the east of Matthews Lab? I hear that it's been condemned. I hear that it's been for sale. Downtown corridor, there's all kinds of things about it, but the pigeons and other people just kind of live there.
I can tell you, Edna, that building has been a huge issue for our enforcement efforts. And pretty much every year we enforce on that building. It's brought into compliance, and then we typically start over again several months down the road. So we are taking, and I have had discussions with the property owner, we are going to be taking a tougher approach on that building if it comes out of compliance again. But again, right now, unless you've seen something that I haven't seen, I think they pretty much have gotten it backboarded up to where there's not
No,
any
it's
issue.
really messy again. Isn't it?
The window on the second story elevation.
8:30.
Thank you very much.